David Sabine, Scrum.works professional Scrum trainer, and the talk will be post-COVID office environments and team structures. So please welcome, and David, stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Artem. Peter, thank you also. It's been nice to hear your thoughts, and I look forward to sharing mine. I'm going to try to keep it very brief so that we can get back on track, and I know we've got a great speaker coming up next. I'm looking forward to hearing from Nimi. Welcome, everyone. I trust you can all see my screen. Good. I've been thinking a lot about the ways that office environments may change or team structures may be treated differently in the next number of years. And I hope to share some thoughts about that. So my name is David Sabine. I'm a professional Scrum trainer. I've been very fortunate to have worked with some fantastic companies and excited to bring some thoughts to you today. Please know that you can find me online at scrum.works. You can use this QR code to get there, of course, or find me at Twitter or LinkedIn. Both are platforms where I like to interact with people. Let's begin by reflecting on what is an office building. Over the years, I think we've done whatever we could to try and make the office environment effective and productive and welcoming, and sometimes we've achieved that and sometimes we haven't achieved that. So after whatever this is, after COVID, after pandemic, after lockdown, after whatever it is in your part of the world, I'm interested to consider ways that companies will redesign their work environment. I'm going to talk through some of those predictions. And then also, I'd like to share some thoughts about how companies might structure their teams and use their offices differently in the future than we have in the past. So for some kinds of work, the way that the company designs the office environment is obvious for some and not much different than before. In some kinds of work, the work really does define the space. And it defines the interface that the employee has with the work. So when we really think carefully about, post-pandemic redesigns of enterprise office environments, we're really talking about knowledge work, right? And so I'm going to focus on those environments in this talk. I'm going to make some predictions here, and I'm going to also invite everybody to please use the chat. I have a chat window open over here on my screen. I can see all of the message. And so as I make these predictions, please tell me or tell others if you think I'm crazy or if you think I'm probably right. And so please also share some thoughts in the Zoom chat. Or if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, please also use the chat features there as well. I can't see those chat features. I can see the Zoom features only, but please share your comments as we go through these. So my first prediction is this: the open office plan is dead. The idea that we're going to pack rows and rows of people side by side at their workstations in a single space, this is gone. This is dead. And no matter how hard we tried to make it look stylish and look funky, it was a bad idea then. It's a bad idea now. The only time that an open office was ever really comfortable or productive was if you were there alone. So I assert that these office plans were never desirable. Rows of densely packed workstations, I don't think is part of our future. And if we really think carefully, even though the open office plan was intended to encourage collaboration and open conversation, actually it was very isolating because companies usually failed to take into account acoustic separation. And so therefore people would put the headphones on and zone into their monitors and do their best to focus while zoning out the rest of the open office space. I'm not the only one to think that open offices are dead. Here's an article from Inc.com magazine where they said the open office plan is dead. And I really liked the author's assertion here. It was a bad idea then. It's an even worse idea now. It's pretty severe words. This author says it's a stupid management fad. I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to go that far, but I do think that open offices are going to see some massive renovation. But here's my second prediction, and I kind of worry about this one. I worry that instead of open offices, I worry that companies are going to again look to cubicles. And I think this is a bad idea. I'll share some reasons why. I think cubicles are dead, but like zombies, they might live on and eat everybody's brains. Again, tell me if you think I'm on track or if I'm not on track. Mick agrees that open offices are dead. Good, let's keep the conversation going. I've got it open on my screen beside me here. But I'm worried about some of the articles that I'm seeing now. I'm not sure the motivation behind these articles. I think the motivation is to sell cubicle furniture, not to improve the work environment. But we're seeing articles like this where they claim that people will want greater dedication and privacy and separation from others. Maybe they're right. I think if people want greater dedication and privacy and separation from others, they're going to stay home. They're going to work from home. And we'll get into that later. But here's another article claiming that open offices are dead. Let's trade them in for cubicles. I think this is moving backwards, not forwards, because when we imagine cubicles, we imagine these beautiful spaces, minimalistic furniture. We can just about imagine ourselves sitting in front of that MacBook right there on that white chair and enjoying this vast office space with these beautiful glass windows in front of us. That's not how cubicles really are. Low ceilings, fluorescent lights, no daylight whatsoever, people packed into a single space in these very isolating environments. I think the notion that we need mid-level staff to all commute from their work from home spaces just to come into the office to work alone, I think that idea is dead. My assertion here is that any work that can be done alone should be. And so why commute from a private office at home just to work in a private cubicle in the enterprise office building? Cubicles were never desirable, I think, for many. And instead, I offer that we could recognize and dignify the work done by pairs, trios, and teams. So similar to my last assertion, any work that can be done by trios and pairs and teams should be. And so let's go to the office specifically for that kind of collaborative work and design the office environment not for individualized work, but instead for collaborative work. So here's another prediction. Get ready. Let me know if you think I'm crazy. I think prediction number 3, team hubs will be increasingly valuable. Maybe not immediately, but increasingly valuable. Teams will continue to meet for events like visionings, kickoff meetings, collaboration during major milestones, and for war room problem solving. I think we're going to see spaces, the open office row and row upon desks will be removed and replaced with furniture like this. We'll see these grand tabletops where people can gather around very ad hoc, serendipitously in open spaces, surrounded by whiteboards, surrounded by windows and things that we can enjoy a nice open space, but isolated acoustically from other teams and given some privacy so that within a team unit, within a cohort, we can have great collaboration and planning discussion, make information visible. I think we're going to see spaces like this more and more. Notice This is for a cohort, a group of people that might schedule this space in their office building maybe twice a week. Maybe the team agrees they're going to go every Monday and Tuesday to the office, and they're going to meet in a cohort space like this. There's a little spot over here, a little enclave where people can go off and have a private meeting, but otherwise they gather together as a cohort. Office spaces like this is another kind of team hub. This would be a great space for in-person training, a planning session, again, for a cohort or a team. I can imagine this space being used by a manager or director to relay some thoughts about planning for the next quarter. Here comes another prediction. I predict one of the reasons that people will go back to the office is that upward mobility will increasingly depend on in-office, in-person presence. One of the reasons to go back to the office is to advance your career. Now, there's been a few articles about this that I want to highlight. One study was done by KPMG here in Canada, and the conclusion was that Canadian workers are ready to come back to the office. Let's look at some of the quotes here. Most workers in Canada want to return to the office, but they prefer a hybrid model, okay, that allows some flexibility to work remotely. I'd like to address the word hybrid soon, okay? We're going to touch on that in a moment. I have some thoughts about that. But nearly half of the people in the survey said that they are worried that they could be discriminated against if or overlooked for job opportunities if they keep working remotely. Why would people be worried about that? Well, here's another article from Bloomberg. Young white-collar staff, so these are young, upwardly mobile professionals that want to advance their career, climb that corporate ladder, so to speak. They are even more worried about seeing their careers stall unless they go back to the office. Younger staff say that the pandemic has left them underinformed and they feel cut out from their teams. 60%, that's a significant number, said that working in a modern collegiate office environment is more important to them following the pandemic. The next prediction related to that one is that I think spacious private offices will again be popular for senior positions. So remember, a lot of the executive offices were being dismantled and the executives were doing hoteling, kind of a strange fad, so that they could get down on the floor and work among people. I think that fad will change. And instead, enterprises are going to find themselves with lots of available real estate in their office environments and wondering, what are we going to do with this? We can turn some of it into team hubs. We can turn some of it into collaboration space, but we've got all this other space. Oh, I think the private office on the corner of the building, with the big glass, the big windows, I think this might be coming back. People that are really interested in advancing their career are going to appreciate these spaces and the opportunity to get back into the office and speak with experienced members of the company and senior people. We're going to see a desire among upwardly mobile professionals to get back into the office, to have these kinds of meetings, trust building meetings in person. I'm imagining this picture might be a mentor and the mentee. And we know that these kinds of relationships extend beyond the work. They extend into the realm of the personal. And people will desire getting back to the office and using the office for these kinds of relationships. Also for serendipitous meetings like over lunch and have a meal together. Next prediction. I'm enjoying some of the comments I'm seeing over here, so please continue commenting. Tell me if I'm right or wrong. I think work from home is here to stay, but Within a couple of years, it will again be the exception, not the norm. So tell me if you think I'm on track or not. Here's an article to that effect. So we have to be careful about who is promoting work from home. We see a lot of articles about this, a lot of essays and case studies. I found this article very interesting in the Harvard Business Review recently that was warning CEOs to not be influenced by the high-profile companies that quickly announce plans to embrace remote work. The article argued that the most active advocates for expanded remote work are the industries that have the most gain financially. Zoom, of course they want all of us to work from home. Facebook, of course they know that people use social media more if they're working from home. So their motives are pretty clear, but let's look instead at what CEOs are doing. CEOs are responsible for the culture of a company. They're responsible to their board for the financial success of the company. What are CEOs really saying? So let's look at a few of these. Here's an article about Goldman Sachs CEO who is absolutely certain that Goldman Sachs will remain a primarily in-office work culture. And look at the reasons he cites. Newly hired analysts get inducted into the Wall Street way from their office desk. This is because they can be side by side other members on the trading floor or looking at investment portfolios and discussing things and hammering through the math together. He's worried that he does not want another class of young people arriving at Goldman Sachs in the summer remotely. So this CEO clearly sees remote workers or the difficulties of remote work as risk to the company. IBM is inviting people back to the office. I found this article very interesting. This is a Washingtonian CEO, the Washingtonian Media CEO. Her name is Kathy Merrill. She's worried about the culture of the company and that the culture of the company may erode if people aren't gathering in person enough. And so look at this quote at the bottom. She says, I am concerned about the unfortunately common office worker who wants to continue working at home and just go into the office on occasion. Remember that the CEO is responsible for the company culture. And for that reason, I think my next prediction is related to a change that we're about to see in office environments. The office environment, I believe, will become increasingly about culture. Here's an example article about a company that has installed a piano in a large atrium. It's a beautiful space. And this is just a little anecdotal tidbit, but I think it hints at a larger trend that we're about to see. I liked this quote here. People want to go to an office that is amenitized and engaging. And likewise, the CEOs will want to create an environment, an office that encourages company culture. I predict we're going to see spaces renovated to enable company events, to enable learning about company history. So you might see more museums in the office. You might see more galleries in the office. I went to an office recently here. There's a manufacturer in my local city, and they have a whole area of their office dedicated to a gallery of past products that they've produced. It's a beautiful space. You can see all the tools that they've made over the years. And I'm just going to pause here, have a look at my chats. Reliable childcare, that's a great addition to the dialogue. Thank you, Sherilyn. I think you're exactly right. You know, people will expect that the office is amenitized and engaging. So Great idea there. Team and workplace on demand. Yes, isn't that cool? I'm going to touch on that right away here. So after whatever this is, after COVID, after pandemic, after lockdown, after whatever this is, I'm interested to think about how will companies structure, how will teams structure themselves, and for what purposes will those teams use their office spaces? Good, I'm checking our time, we're at good time. I have an article, by the way, about team structures. I invite you after my talk to grab these slides. I think the organizers are going to share links to my slide deck, and you can please take a look at this link. It's an article in depth where I speak about team structures, but I'm going to give a summary right here. And in order of my preference, in order of my professional advice, in fact, co-located teams, I think, are still extremely valuable and offer benefits that we don't find or can't find in other team structures. So what I mean by co-located, this is a team in which all members spend significant work time together in the same physical space. Now, what I mean here is team, not entire company. Notice in my diagram here, there's 8 people, not 80. Okay, I'm not talking about open office spaces. I'm talking about, a classroom size team room where the whole team can come together, have in-person interaction, co-located. I think following this global experience we've had in the knowledge work field, the second best team structure is remote, all remote, only remote. This is a single team unit. They have to coordinate their work day to day. They occupy separate geographic locations, such as their own homes or their own private office spaces, and they communicate with each other exclusively through digital tools. We're finding that people are capable of this. It exposes some risks in terms of cybersecurity and dependency, some communication challenges, but in order of, let's say, preference, co-location, great, remote only, almost as great. And then we get into suboptimal structures. I think that this structure is very problematic. I call this the dislocated team. It's the opposite of co-located. This is a group of people who routinely have to coordinate their day-to-day activity, but they are acoustically or visually separated by walls like cubicles, and they working in separate office buildings. And notice that we have some people co-located, other people remote. This causes these people to have to maintain 2 completely distinct modes of communication. We have in-person communication. Some people can just turn to each other and talk. Other people are segregated by space, maybe time zone, segregated by a digital tool. This mixed mode of communication, I think, poses challenges that we should avoid. And we can avoid if we work remotely entirely or co-locate entirely. And by the way, I don't think teams are going to choose to co-locate 100% of the time all the time. They're not going to choose to work remotely 100% of the time all the time. Okay, we'll get into more of that later when I talk about hybrid environments. But I think this dislocation is suboptimal. Look at this example. This is among the worst of the worst. This is 4 people that left their comfortable work from home space just to go to the office to work privately in an office. They're still dislocated from each other. They're still defaulting to the digital tools to communicate. They can't just turn to each other. Like, let's just remove the walls here. Just remove the walls. Then they can co-locate. I think distributed teams, therefore, will look like this in the future. On any given day, we will have some teams that choose to entirely co-locate and some teams that choose to entirely work remotely. So we have team units here. each of which choose a very cohesive, sensible communication strategy, either entirely in person or entirely not in person. Let's consider now, what does hybrid work environment mean to you? And I'm going to offer some ideas here. I think we have choices to make about hybrid environments. If we've learned anything from this global disruption that we've experienced, if we've learned anything from this, I think teams of people will make agreements to co-locate some of the time and be all remote some of the time. If we've not learned anything from this, I think teams will not reach clear agreements. And on any given day, some people will be remote, some people will be in office. It will never be known which is which, who is who to expect in the office on any given day, who to expect at home on any given day. I think that a team that fails to reach sensible and explicit agreements about this, I think they're going to not have a competitive advantage. They will have a competitive disadvantage. If we've learned anything from this, then, when we talk about hybrid environments, I think teams will gather in the office for training events, company social events, kickoff and wrap up events, product launch, major release events, retrospectives, planning, various other team agreements. If we've not learned anything from this experience, I think companies, well, like I said earlier, teams will fail to reach clear agreement. And so executives are going to start making decisions about this. Executives are going to say things like, if you're a developer, you can work from home, but if you're a senior architect, you need to be in the office. I mean, that might make sense for a very brief period of time, but also people need to make clear agreements with each other and own some of these decisions on their own. I think companies might make a mistake to decide based on the calendar, like everyone work in office Monday to Thursday, and then everybody work from home on a Friday. That might work in a very small company, such as a team or a couple of teams, but in a larger organization, that kind of blanket policy will be subverted. It won't make sense for everybody. It will cause some grief, or maybe among the worst options would be that a manager just decides based on their personal preference. Like, oh, that QA manager prefers their staff in person. Oh, so if you're in that team, you're working in the office all the time. And some people might like that and other people won't. So the people who like that are going to navigate their way into that team. The people who don't like that are going to navigate their way out of the team. And that these feelings are transient. Not everyone is going to agree to that all of the time. So again, let me know if you think I'm crazy. Let me know if you think I have a point. And I'd like to pause here. We have time for a couple of questions. I've laid out some predictions and some thoughts. I've had a little opportunity to look at some of the chat, but we have time here for some questions.
Great presentation.
And who was that speaking?
It's Mimi.
Oh yes, hello. Thank you for speaking. People now know that they know your voice, so we know you're coming next. So do you have any thoughts?
No, I 100% agree with a lot of the things that you were talking about. And just, I think right now, just looking at the current climate of working from home, which is why Agile is such now a major disruptor, as you can tell, kind of executing work. I know for me, I've been fortunate enough to kind of be more at that enterprise-wide level, and I can see how being able to be at home, working from home as a mom has been really, really beneficial and very critical for just my time at home and being able to effectively lead and delegate tasks with my teams. So I see a lot of benefits, and I feel like even working from home, you're doing more work if you think about it. There's not time for the coffee and the hallway chats. At home, it's kind of like even to go to the bathroom is even a problem sometimes because you're constantly on your computer all day. We haven't even talked about Zoom fatigue and all that stuff that you experience working from home. So I actually see it's actually a lot harder working from home because you're trying to maximize your time with your family, with your kids, being a spouse, doing chores around the house, and you're also probably even now working over 8 hours a day because you're on Zoom and your computer all day, probably paying your bills, following up on stuff for school, for your kids, and the list goes on and on. So this was an amazing presentation. So thank you for sharing that.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the comments. I agree that, so I want to just counter something you've said. Not only are some people working a lot more and in front of their computer just nonstop, other people I think are at risk of doing a lot of invisible work, that people are performing some work and then not having the opportunity to like really socialize it and get the word out and share it with others to demonstrate or to make known their progress. So transparency of the work is a huge challenge always, but I think even to a greater degree now that so many people are working remotely and privately. But I echo your sentiment about being a parent at home. I have 2 young daughters. I've had to balance all of that with their we're doing school at home. It's a huge challenge. So what are your thoughts though about how you might want to balance the in-office
Right.
time with your at-home time? Like what's your personal preference or prediction?
That's a really good question. This is something that I've definitely talked about a lot at Capital One, and even when we're going through PI planning. We don't always have to do a team building exercise.
Yeah.
Team building should look like logging off the computer a little bit early so that you can have time to actually spend with your family. Because I do feel like there's a sense and there's a need of we want to be proactive and always condition people to do something engaging. But I do feel like thinking about just, hey, we've had the PI planning increments. We've even had to scale back. And that looks like maybe just a 2-hour check-in high level. And then the kind of meet and have their own conversations, right? And then after that, all right, we all log off and that looks like maybe at 2 or 3 o'clock, we're off the computer so that you can have some time away from the computer because Zoom fatigue is real. It's actually, there's been studies out there. So keeping people on Zoom and saying, hey, you want to do things like a team building exercise may not be feasible also. So scaling back on some meetings, I think will be really helpful and just kind of creating a cadence for your team that really, really works. Because we're talking about organizational change management here, and which is something that I'm well versed in because that's my background. I was an OrCom major. So as we're going through all of these things that we're going through during COVID, I'm looking at it from a holistic standpoint, from a change management perspective, and just seeing how do we acclimate people throughout this process also as well.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that, and then maybe someone else has a thought too to share. But I'm hoping that the office environments will be used for gatherings. So these might be gatherings like training sessions, like in-person, hands-on training, where then at the end of the day, or like you said, like a PI planning, and then mid-afternoon, close the laptops and get away from the desks and everybody go to some sort of social event within the office. I think we might see in office spaces, performance space, auditoriums, a stage with a piano. And so for, corporate socials in the mid-afternoon, because that's a cultural event. And as I mentioned, CEOs are really responsible to encourage cultural cohesion within the company. And so, thanks for your comments.
No, absolutely. And then even things like just doing a pulse check on like people's mental health too is going to be a thing, or has to be a thing. mental health, psychological safety, the list goes on, because I know from experience, and I know most Scrum Masters here can definitely say, the average developer or engineer is not going to tell you, hey, guess what? I'm experiencing burnout. That just never happens. They're not going to tell you and say that they are burnt out. You're going to have to do like little pulse checks and little activities to actually see how is the team progressing and tracking from a mental and psychological safety aspect too as well.
Yeah, thanks. Great comments. We have a little bit more time. If anyone has, I think we have about 3 minutes, 4 minutes.
Yeah,
any other
absolutely.
comments or thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for the speech and a lot of sharings. I want to add that recently in Ukraine we had a big questionnaire for more than 3,000, I believe, software developers. What do they think about going back to offices? And only 3% answer that they want to go back to offices.
Interesting.
Around 43% say that they don't feel safe to go back to offices till the end of quarantine, and that was their answer. And others say that they are quite more productive at home. So yeah, it's
Interesting.
quite an average answer here in Ukraine, at least.
Can you tell me, in that study, like, did the study break down how many of those respondents are often working with someone remote overseas or in another time zone?
Oh, believe me, a lot of them.
Yeah. Okay, so like I can totally understand that. If I were working in Chernihiv, let's say, or Kiev, and most of the time I'm working with a team in, some people in Toronto and some people in Sydney, Australia. What does it matter that I'm sitting in an office desk in the office building, or if I'm sitting at home with my own internet connection? So if that's my common work environment, that's why I think, like I said in my presentation, that the remote only option is, I think, here to stay. People are learning ways to make it very effective. And thank you for that input. Can you share the link to that study or something like that?
Unfortunately, it's Russian or Ukrainian language. I'm not sure, but I will share with you if you are interested. I believe that Google Translate could help you easily.
Yeah, please. I actually have a number of friends that speak Russian. Maybe I can talk with them about it.
And you can even ask me to help if it's needed.
Okay.
So
thank you.
yeah.
And by the way, who's speaking? Is that Mick?
Sorry. No.
No. Oh, it's Artem.
Oh, yeah. Artem. Oh, thank you, Artem. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And are there any other thoughts or questions?
Mick, maybe you?
Yeah, I have one. Actually, I have several, but in this your vision of office, I didn't hear, with maybe some surprise, I didn't hear some gyms, maybe kitchens, maybe I don't know, the play room for children, something like that. As for me, even before COVID, such stuff of such part of the large office is significantly great. So if you have the place where you can live, like your kid after school, for example, when you sit in office and finishing your work or something like that, is as I see a good advantage even before quarantine. And now of course is I seen people who bring her kids to office when they doing the work, and kids running their online lessons. So that's a big change actually, and maybe the offices in future, even if we win this nasty virus, will grow such home-like or maybe kindergarten-like approaches, or maybe at least the pub-like stuff should appear in office. The place where you can scream shots, you can maybe drink something, not coffee, after work, and maybe gym equipment more. Add more to such stuff. That's my thought.
Yeah. I agree completely. I touched on that a little bit in my talk by saying that that we're going to see the office spaces used more for cultural cohesion. And part of that, I mean, is that to create a social environment that goes beyond the work. So to invite, like if I'm going to go from my home and I'm going to commute to downtown Toronto, maybe I'll take my children and make a day out of it. Part of the day I'm in meetings, part of it they're with us in a social event at the office. So yeah, I appreciate the comments. I think you're very right. Let me just finish by saying a summary here. Office environments, I think, will be valuable cultural hubs. Individualized work will largely occur in private offices, at home or near their residence. More work may occur among pairs, trios, and teams. And for those reasons, people will go to the office and gather in person. So the majority of the work in office will be team-based. I think that's a fantastic future. Teams ought to carefully discuss and make agreements about working from home versus in-office activity. Teams that make those kinds of explicit agreements will have a competitive advantage. And thank you so much for being here today. And I appreciate the organizers that reached out to me to invite me to speak. I always love the opportunity to hear others' ideas and to share my own. So thanks very much. And I'm going to turn the mic back to Artem.
Thank you, David, so much. And